My name's Denise Leavesley, and it's a great privilege for me to chair this meeting on the topic of Has the Time Come for Public Statistics? The meeting's been organised by the RSS's National Statistics Advisory Group, and I'll say a few words about the meeting after I've said something about housekeeping. Housekeeping in a virtual meeting is rather strange. I'm not going to tell you about where the loos are or fire alarms. But what I will say is that the way that we're organising the meeting is that we'll have two speakers, Paul Allen and then Adrian Beck, and then they'll each speak for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have three discussants. I'll introduce them in a few minutes, and the discussants will each speak for about 10 minutes. We're not expecting to have discussion until those five speakers have finished. And then we'll open it up for the audience, and we will leave plenty of time for discussions, so please do start to think about your contributions. At that time, what I'm going to do is to ask you if you're happy to raise your hand and then put your screen on and unmute yourself and contribute as if we were in a face-to-face meeting. If any of you are not happy with that, then do use the chat button, but we prefer to have a face-to-face discussion if we can. I would emphasize that this meeting is being recorded, and therefore, if any of you have any concerns about the recording and you don't want to appear on it, or you have any other concerns, then if you could get in touch with me or with the RSS office, then we'll handle that. But we assume that you, by attending this meeting, that you are consenting to be included. Okay, so the meeting is on the really interesting topic of whether we should have public statistics. And a few of us, some of the audience and two of the other speakers, Steve and Angela, were in a meeting recently of the official statistics, part of the International Statistics Institute, meeting that took place in Poland, when we were discussing the fundamental principles of official statistics. We were raising the fact that official statistics nowadays is dependent more and more upon data that is not necessarily come through the official statistics system, but may be data that's produced, say, from administrative data sources or external data sources of various sorts. And do we need the fundamental principles to go beyond official statistics? And is the concept of public statistics a good one? How would we define it? How would we manage this this concept? And so that's really the essence of this meeting. And it's arisen in many different contexts. And I think we'll also be discussing how over the last couple of years with COVID statistics, many of those have not come through the official statistics channels, but they've been really important to understanding the progress of the pandemic and the process of dealing with the pandemic globally. So it's a really interesting topic, and I'm so pleased that the National Statistics Advisory Group has raised it. And this is a meeting for us to start to discuss the concept. And then at the end, Paul will talk a little bit about what now, where do we go from here? So I gather that there's a round table event being planned for July. So he'll tell us a bit about that. Right, so Paul is going to be our first speaker, and Paul is the chair of the National Statistics Advisory Group. And I would ask all of you to, if you're ordinary participants, ordinary in inverted commas, to mute yourselves and to turn off your screens. I'm quite happy for the panel to keep theirs on if they wish, but if you could turn yours off, and then I'll tell you at the time we start the discussion, and you can put them back on again. Okay, so Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to have this opportunity to discuss the concept of public statistics, and thanks to the RSS's official statistics section and international development section for actually organising the meeting. It's about work being taken forward by a group of members of the NSAG, and I greatly acknowledge the contributions of Juliana, Michael, Rebecca and Amanda. Also, Guy Nason during his time on NSAG. And I'd like to also acknowledge my personal collaboration with David Hand over the years, including an opinion piece published in Significance in April 2021, where we concluded that official statistics systems should be broadened so that they generate quality public statistics. Let me just give a caveat. This is flying a kite, not launching or promoting an RSS policy. It's great that iOS and others are exploring this, and we want to see if there's something here that we could pursue in kind of more formal way as I'm working with others. Just a bit of background: the National Statistics Advisory Group, as you can see on, hope you can see on the screen, is a group of volunteers with a strong interest in a range of policy issues surrounding the UK's official statistics system. It's NSAG helps to develop policy on official statistics on behalf of the Council. Official statistics, the RSS strongly believes, as of course do many others, that official statistics provide the cornerstone of the evidence needed to generate informed debate and drive good decision making. We take it as given that statistics that meet the test of practical utility are to be compiled and made available on an impartial basis to honour citizens' entitlement to public information, serving the government, the economy and the public with data about all these things: economic, demographic, social and environmental situation. And as Denise has alluded to, these words are taken from the United Nations Fundamental Principles for Official Statistics, and are part of the vision for official statistics to provide an indispensable element in the information system of a democratic society. And it goes on to stress that the official statistics that meet the test of practical utility are to be compiled and made available. And that's a kind of key part of the official statistics. The words are of course used by the UK's Statistics Authority, who gave their current strategy the title Statistics for the Public Good. NSAG's interest in public statistics stems from looking at this 5-year strategy, which covers 2020 to 2025, and how it's being implemented. We also looked at the 2019 recommendations from a parliamentary committee and how those recommendations are also being addressed. And all of this is kind of based on legislation here in the UK, which for official statistics, which embraces the idea of the public good. And you might say, well, what's the problem? Actually, I mean, why, given all this, given we have some legislation, given we have a statistics authority, given that we know we have masses of official statistics, what's the problem? And very broad brush, there are 3 probably quite long-standing issues here. So kind of while it's accepted that the statistics produced by official statistical agencies should be for the public good, this begs the question of what statistics should be produced. This is not well answered, I think, in the strategy document or in present processes and procedures. There are a whole raft of ways in which official statisticians develop new statistics, and we've seen great examples of that during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Could I just interrupt?
Yes.
Should there be slides showing? Because we've only got your first one.
There should, and I'm obviously doing something wrong, Denise. Terribly sorry.
No problem.
Let's try again. So if I thought I was going through this, let me try and advance these then. Right? Can you see that was my slide about flying a kite?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. There's the background. Sorry. Okay. And so we're there. I talked about the United Nations Fundamental Principles. statistics for the public good, and I'm saying, what's the problem? Is that okay?
Great.
Can you see the slide now? Yeah. Okay. So on the first one, what statistics should be produced? I don't think it's kind of as well answered as it could be. Certainly not particularly well answered in the strategy document I talked about, or in the processes and procedures. Of course, official statisticians produce new statistics regularly, all the time, in response to various international, national requirements. But I think there's a kind of a step missing, which is kind of the overview. The second kind of broad issue is, as Denise already mentioned, increasing amount and range of statistics that are relevant to the public good are not official statistics. And the strategy, the UK strategy, focuses on the use of data from administrative sources, but doesn't particularly address what we saw in the pandemic, which is these things called official figures or non-official figures or non-official sources, as well as official statistics. And the third broad concern is that there's a kind of innate tendency for official statistics producers to prioritize government users over others. It's a long-standing, it's a kind of cultural issue, perhaps. It's perhaps different between, in this country, ONS as a independent or non-ministerial department, and other parts of the government statistical service, where they're serving both ministers and the public. But there's still kind of a concern there. This is from a Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee report in July 2019. The full report is really well worth reading. It makes many recommendations on all aspects of the government's of official statistics. But I've selected this this paragraph from the opening of the report's conclusions. We agree with the evidence that those producing official statistics do not understand all of today's users and potential users, and how statistics used, seem not to have carried out research into users since 2007, and haven't followed up the research that was undertaken then. Producers not able to close statistical gaps or appropriately refine the presentation of existing statistics. UKSA is not delivering public good as required under the legislation. Really quite a kind of forceful conclusion. And note also that PACAC, as the committee is called, observes that there is an existing legislative base for statistics for the public good. The issue is how this is being implemented and delivered. So the suggestion is kind of a concept of public statistics as one way, kind of an overarching kind of one way forward to try and kind of readjust and tackle these issues. We're focusing obviously on the UK, but I think there are issues here which benefit from international consideration, discussion with international organizations, learning from other countries. It's great that we have that today. So the concept, in a sense, might be to kind of shift the focus from identifying the status of various sets of statistics, these are official statistics or these are official figures or whatever, to the role that they perform. Think about what are they for. It's a very kind of telling phrase, I think, that Julia Lane in the States uses, which is that when a new set of statistics are produced, they should be accompanied by a statement which says these statistics are being produced so that ... And I think that would be a kind of just one way of moving to the role rather than thinking about the status. And that kind of then raises issues. Is it official statistics alone that can have the function of supporting the public good? Perhaps the concept of public statistics should recognize increasingly complex data ecosystem as an opportunity for more timely, relevant, and above all, more useful statistics. Here's the utility point, rather than as a threat to current ways of delivering official statistics. And I think this should also kind of fit with a move towards more coherent statistical analysis, not just the publication of individual sets of statistics, as well as data science applications within official statistics. And one example of this last point might have been an analysis of the distribution and spread of COVID across the UK, which draws not only on the official statistics in the COVID infection survey, but also on the academic REACT study, which colleagues in Imperial have been working on. And why stop there? There's also the Zoe app as giving a source of sort of data. Now it increases the complexity, but perhaps it also increases the richness, and those statistics together could answer what's going on and how statistics, how COVID is spreading and rising or falling. The essence of public statistics is to draw on existing statistics and to devise new ones to help answer questions about society, the economy, and the environment. So drawing on statistics to answer questions about all of these issues. There's of course much to recognise in the UK official statistics on how the system is striving to provide statistics for the public good. I'm not suggesting that this is far from recognised. Here's Ed Humferson, the head of the Office for Statistics Regulation, starting from issues at the centre of public debate that need statistics, that need reliable statistics. Ed says we do not know all of the issues that are going to be at the centre of public debate, but we, OSR, will stand up for the public's right to access statistics and data that exhibit trustworthiness, quality, and value. OSR is also developing a better understanding of the public good of statistics, hopefully forming a shared, widely understood basis and highlighting the full range of users. ONS is rolling out a new user engagement strategy for the Government Statistical Service and is branding that as user engagement for the public good. Mary Louise Gowan's OSR blog only a few days ago, 29th April, exploring the value of statistics for the public, draws on the latest public confidence in official statistics survey, including evidence that the public value the independent provision of statistics, as well as challenges to the misuse of statistics. Public statistics will need various things to happen. It will need a kind of regular assessment of the needs for public statistics, measuring what matters, measuring what's important. Need to be able to identify appropriate sources and not assuming that anything that's measured is appropriate here. You'll need quality control and checking and honest and clear presentations understandable by the audience. Those familiar with the United Nations guidelines on national statistics systems recognize that a statistics advisory council helps with some of this, especially the first two bullets. And we welcome the National Statistics Expert User Advisory Committee, recently created and chaired by David Hand, as the first official UK Statistics Advisory Council. It's been a long time since the 1966 Parliamentary Committee report suggested an official standing committee on statistics users. That never happened. Various examples outside of the official statistics system run for many years, particularly the Statistics Users Council and its very well organised annual conferences. And the kind of question is, I guess, as well as these specifics and understanding these specifics of the system, is the time now right for a broader debate over the concept of public statistics, building on existing developments and setting a clear shared vision for that. I want to emphasize that we're drawing on the work of others. We're not, we haven't invented this. This is about kind of building on the thoughts of others. Social trends is one from earlier days of the UK official statistics system, when non-official sources were routinely used in this flagship official statistics publication, what the media invariably called the ONS's annual survey of life in Britain. It was discontinued some years ago. Current examples, SDG indicators for sustainable development goals are a global challenge right now, where non-official sources are greatly required and are being explored. Steve McFeely has written about this, and look forward to hearing what Adrian has to say about this, how this has been taken forward in the UK. The Digital Economy Act here in the UK is kind of tackling practicalities as well as kind of broad concerns like data ethics and governance issues. I mentioned Judy Lane, she's pushing for a kind of public data infrastructure. In the US, the United Nations, through its privacy enhancing technologies and pilot works there.
I think you've hung, Paul. No? If he doesn't come back in the next minute or so, I think we'll move on, because I think he was towards the end of his slides, so 12 of 16, I think. No? Paul? No, in that case, I'm going to move on to our next speaker and invite Paul to come back after our next speaker to just complete his slides. So the next speaker is Adrian Bake from the Office for National Statistics. And as Paul has already mentioned, he is in a position to talk to us about the use in ONS of non-official sources, and in particular, a protocol for assessing non-official sources. So Adrian, please pass to you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, perfect, fantastic. So I'll just get up my notes. Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Paul, for this really interesting presentation and interesting start to the discussion. So hello, everyone. In today's presentation, I will be giving you an overview of the ONS's protocol for assessing non-official sources for the SDGs and how it's working. Sourcing appropriate data for the indicators can be challenging. We've traditionally used official sources from official statistics producers to report UK data, for example, sources from government departments or United Nations agencies. However, for some indicators, it's quite difficult to identify official sources that report exactly what the UN. And in these instances, we look beyond these traditional sources and begin to think about the opportunities that we have to use non-official sources. For our purposes, we have defined non-official statistics as statistics produced by non-official organizations which are not mandated to comply with formal standards. So, for example, here in the UK, this would be the UK's Code of Practice for Statistics. So this is any output that does not come from a UK government department or body, or any official international reporting body, so Eurostat or OECD. This leaves us with organizations such as charities, businesses, or academia, all of which produce rich data that may be of use in the SDG context, but are non-official. Of course, there are benefits and risks associated with using non-official data. One of the benefits, for example, is that it promotes collaboration and inclusivity, and that benefit the public good and prosperity. So using data from academia, businesses, and charities can help us achieve this, and also help us fill a lot of these data gaps that we have. But using non-official data does come with its risks. The biggest risk that we identified at the ONS is around quality and the potential reputational damage associated with that. As a national statistical institute, we need to ensure that the statistics and data we use are of good quality and are trustworthy, regardless of whether they originate from an official or non-official source. So in order to achieve this and be able to use these rich non-official sources with confidence, the SDG team at the ONS have developed a protocol for assessing the quality of non-official sources. So what is the protocol? It is a tool that allows the UK SDG team at the ONS to score a statistical source based on criteria that are key in the production of official statistics and the specific SDG requirements set by the UN. The protocol is based on a model from Statistics Netherlands and is aligned to the UK Statistics Authority's Code of Practice and the UK Statistics Authority's Code for Practice and the Ethics Advisory Committee guidelines. A protocol is specified to the SDGs. However, this can be adapted to a non-SDG context. And in the UK, we have already been approached by statistical teams that think this type of tool would be useful for their work that is non-SDG related. The tool provides us with a numeric score so that a decision can be made on whether the quality of the source is appropriate to use in the SDG context and on the SDG data side. The assessment protocol has two stages, an initial pass or fail gateway, followed by a scoring matrix. Both stages are based on a list of quality principles that need to be satisfied to a various degree. To pass the gateway stage, the source must comply with the quality dimensions of ethics and privacy, transparency and accountability, and need. Any fail on these criteria means that the source is not suitable for use towards SDG reporting, and we will not use this source to report data on the UK side. If the source passes all criteria on the gateway stage, it gets scored from 1, which is not acceptable, to 3, which is the ideal score, along the quality dimensions of relevance, methods, coverage, timeliness and availability, data journey awareness, and quality assurance. An average score of above 1.5 across these dimensions and no score of 0 suggests that the source is suitable for the SDG reporting. The template we use to aid with the assessment contains 3 text fields where the assessor will enter just a justification for each score. The template also contains a detailed information to help justify the decision with also along the decision-making process, such as a description of what it takes to score a pass or any of the numerical values on the metric stage. I will run you through an example of this. I will run through an example quickly in a second. The final scores then also checked independently by another member of the team before a decision is finalized. So here's an example of our assessment template and the detailed description to indicate what constitutes a pass or a fail for the 3 strands assessed as part of the quality gateway. As a reminder, if any of these dimensions fail, we would not deem the source of suitable quality to use on the SDG reporting. It is important that we are confident that any source we use and therefore endorse meets these criteria, as if we could not be confident that the source are ethical, value privacy, and are transparent. Otherwise, this would be a risk and also aligns with reputational damage for brings reputational damage for the organization. I won't read out the detail on this assessment, but the example I have here is for indicator 8.10.1b, which is the number of ATMs per 100,000 adults. The source we identified in the UK that gives us this information is from Link, which is the UK's largest cash machine network, which almost every cash machine is being connected to. As you can see in this, the source met the requirements of each strand of the gateway to pass, and then to move on to the next step of the protocol, which is the quality matrix, which is on the next slide. Again, this slide shows the way in which our assessment template allows each dimension of the quality matrix to be scored, and the detailed description to help staff to make a decision on these scores. As outlined previously, 3 is the highest score, down to 0, which is deemed to be unacceptable for use. If any dimension scores 0, then regardless of the overall average score, the source would not be allowed to be used for SDG reporting. There are, however, opportunities to work with the data provider to improve the quality of their data so that it can be included in the SDG reporting in the future. And we will give an example of this in a moment. The scores for each dimension are entered into the assessment template, and the justification for these scores is entered as well. As I said, an average score is then calculated and the pass or fail is indicated. So again, to pass, the average score must be greater than 1.5 and no dimension must be below 0. Within the detailed description of the dimension, you will notice there are references to Q3.3, etc. These are specific parts of the UK's code of practice for statistics that we deem to be key in assessing a data source's quality. And we did this in collaboration with the authors of this code. The code is designed for official statistics in the UK, so we do not expect that non-official statistical sources would satisfy all of these principles. Therefore, the protocol is based on these elements we identified and most relevant and critical. And this code should be used alongside the protocol for reference. I touched upon this earlier. So the key benefit of using this tool is that even if a source fails the assessment initially, the reasons this allows us to clearly identify the reason for why this is the case, and then allows us to go back to the data provider and we can liaise with them to try and remedy these in some cases. So, for example, we recently identified a suitable non-official proxy source for indicator 5.51, which is the proportion of seats held by women in national parliaments and local government. The source we identified is produced by Oscar Research, which is a company that collects and analyzes data on UK public services. Although the data scored well on most dimensions of the protocol, it failed overall. This was because the data published on the provider's website is overwritten at each update, so there's no historic time series publicly available. Therefore, it could not pass the timeliness and availability dimension on the scoring matrix and got therefore a 0, and overall it meant that the source would fail and didn't pass our assessment. So through communicating and engaging with the supplier, we explained our standards and needs to use their data. Following this feedback, Oscar Research then worked with us and published a time series on these figures that we needed, so the source could then successfully pass and would get a satisfactory score. In doing this work, we also identified that the wording timeliness and ongoing timeliness wasn't really appropriate. So there's an ongoing evaluation of this process, and we're continuously working on improvement of the protocol in collaboration with data providers. Our protocol for the assessment of non-official sources is a dynamic document, as I just mentioned. So through the increased usage, we will continue to refine the quality dimensions so that they are better suited to assess potential SDG sources. The criteria outlined initially were first published in March 2021, and then in July 2021. And in March this year, we updated the clarification for the protocol following the feedback we received from users and also from the increased initial use. As already outlined, we introduced more clarity to the timeliness and availability dimension to ensure providers are clear that that there should be a back series provided with current data, and also to accommodate statistics for environmental indicators where timely data cannot be made available on an annual basis and is likely to take longer periods of time. We also merged the data journey awareness and dimension with the quality assurance to form data quality. Through increased use, we have found that many non-official sources didn't have the published information on the data journey and the Q&A process of the level of detail required on the first iteration of this protocol. This was something that we were content to revise, as the level of information that was being publicly shared by these data providers allowed us to have confidence on the quality of this data without overburdening organizations with a level of detail that was unnecessary. It is of key importance to be flexible with our approach, but also be transparent. Of course, the tool does not come without its limitations and risks, but through a dynamic reviewing process, we hope to continue to improve our scoring system and mitigate those risks. Here, finally, we have a few examples of how we used non-official sources. So these are some of the examples we use to fill data gaps using non-official data sources that have all assessed against the protocol and deemed of appropriate quality for use. This is a subset of the total number. We do have a few more, and we're actively currently working on some other ones, such as beach plastic, for example, which is indicator 14.1.1. Yeah, so this is the last slide. So this protocol was developed again was produced initially by Statistics Netherlands, and we hope that other national statistical institutes could adapt our tool for their own use. And as it currently stands, the tool is heavily reliant on the UK Code of Practice for Statistics, and refers to the statistical clauses from the 3 pillars of the code, which are trustworthiness, quality, and value. Essentially, the assessment should be done in parallel with reference to the Code of Practice, which is here appropriate to the UK context. Although the principles are relatively high level and comparable to similar international standards, such as the United Nations National Quality Assurance Framework and the fundamental principles of official statistics, we welcome to adjust these specific dimensions to fit other national contexts and really encourage the use of this tool in a much more broader setting. That is my presentation. Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for jumping in when Paul's connection went down. Really fascinating. I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion of that. I was at a meeting last night from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US, where they were talking about how they're defining transparency. So I'd be quite interested to hear your views on that issue. So thank you. Paul, would you like to take over? You were on slide 12, I think, when you hung.
Well, I'm sorry about that. Very rare for the network to go down, but it did here. I think I just wanted to mention one more slide, and I don't need to put it up on the screen. It's really kind of the kind of things discussion that we're at, and we'd welcome contributions sort of now and after, indeed after the meeting. I mean, we're really asking kind of fairly broad questions like, is the concept of public statistics helpful, sound, and worth exploring, or not? I mean, are we barking up the wrong tree here? If so, I mean, if it is worth exploring, what exactly might a public statistics system look like? Is this about rebooting the official statistics system, especially to upgrade user engagement, understand user needs and address them even better than they do at present? Or are there other models for delivering public statistics? Is this about using existing resources better, or more prioritization perhaps, or securing additional resources? And how would public statistics help in kind of particular spheres of interest? It's great we've heard from Adrian about the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's a very broad coverage. That kind of indicates to me that there are a whole host of areas that could benefit not just within the SDGs, but more generally on the use of official statistics. So with apologies again for disappearing temporarily, thanks for listening.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. So we've now had the two main presentations, and we've now got three invited discussants, and that's fantastic because they come from very different areas of expertise. So we're going to start with Deanna Ledbetter, who is the chair of the Health Statistics Users Group, and she's an international health information specialist. So Deanna, about 10 minutes or so, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Denise, and thank you very much to Paul and Adrian. Very interesting. I'm particularly interested in Adrian's comments on that the extension of what they're doing to non-SDG areas. So I think that's that's very, very interesting. I've been asked to offer some thoughts from the perspective of a user of statistics, drawing on my experience of chairing the Health Statistics User Group, and also as an active member of the Stats User Forum, which covers a wide range of different types of statistics. Considering the question that we're looking at today, do we need to move beyond official statistics? This implies that the set of official statistics is not adequate in some way. And I think that then brings in the consideration, is it because the current set is not accessible enough? Is it not understandable enough? Or not detailed enough, not going down to smaller geographies? Or is it that there are actual gaps in what official statistics produces? So in terms of answering the question, we're looking at the current situation in relation to the availability and access of statistics for the people that need or want it, and what, if anything, needs to be improved. In doing that, I think we probably need to unpick and clarify some of the terms so we're all talking about the same thing. And once again, I was very pleased Adrian mentioned this idea of people not understanding the same thing by the terms that we all use. So just highlighting a few of those terms and offering some comments from the user perspective. Can't go into all of them in detail. First of all, who are we talking about as far as the users? Various papers talk about citizens, they talk about the public, talk about users, that's anyone who's using the statistics. So if we look at that broad area of users, we need to be thinking about obviously users within government, but also many experienced analysts and statisticians in the public sector organizations at regional, local level, in academia and in the private sector. And many of those are using that for their own work, but also very importantly, they're information intermediaries, and they are making their important information source for the wider public. And then in addition, there's the direct use by the public, which once again splits down into active and informed users and the less experienced, harder to reach users. So quite a range of different users who may want to be looking at public statistics. This then moves on to another important issue, which is why is the statistics needed? What are those purposes that we would consider to be within the definition of public statistics? The usual definition is, for the public good, for the benefit and the well-being of the public. But does this only refer to data that has been collected and statistics produced from the data specifically designed for the public good? Or is it referring to any statistics that can be used for the public good, whether or not that was the original intention of the data or the analysis? And does this use for the public good refer only to decision making at a group and collective level to feed into policy decisions? Or are we talking about statistics that assist individuals, members of the public, in their decision making, holding governments to account, but also individual decisions about their own lives? For example, information about the effectiveness and risks of various treatments. So, it could be really quite wide ranging. After clarifying those first two, then that allows us to start looking at what are these statistics that we're thinking about. And if we take that broader definition of purposes, this means it's not just related to the public sector. I mean, as Adrian has mentioned, it's relating to a whole range of different areas. If we're thinking about clarifying terms, one thing that needs to be brought out is national statistics. For the ONS, official statistics that have been assessed as fully compliant with the code are what they term national statistics. But actually, for a general user, that doesn't make any sense. National statistics are what a user is thinking that needs to be available at national level to help them understand what's happening and help inform their decisions. So actually, the idea of introducing a different term, public statistics, is actually very helpful. And so this concept of public statistics, and another word for something broader, isn't actually new. It's actually what we've been talking about for quite a long time, and recognizing it so it can be discussed and so we can talk about the aims and roles of the different players is really very, very helpful. It's also another aspect that's important to clarify is who are producing the statistics. And once again, I think it's been touched on already. Looking at what's happening in practice, there is increasingly a wide range of data sources. This is enabled by the technology that's now available to support collection and processing of data. Increasingly, a wide range of organisations involved in working with data collection and analysis in areas that could be considered as being for the public good. And increasingly, there's a wide range of individuals and organisations making information available to the public, often taking official statistics and representing them in a way that's more accessible and understandable. The pandemic has really highlighted and increased the speed of these developments. And in the discussions on what we've learned from the pandemic and how we go forward, that has been mentioned and actually welcomed. So that's something that's very important to build on. From a user perspective, it's probably irrelevant as to who's producing the statistics. They just want the information they need, and they want to be assured that that statistics is accessible, understandable, relevant and useful, and reliable, including complying with recognised good standards, although a general user probably wouldn't know about those standards. But also, if there are different organisations involved in this wider world, the users need to be ensured that those statistics, wherever they come from, are consistent, compatible, complementary. And all of that needs collaboration. Really important, Adrian mentioned that word, because that is something else that was very much a feature of work during the pandemic, and we hope will continue and is absolutely essential if we're looking in this broader dimension. This then raises the question of what's the role of the centre in this large and really complex data information world. The centre can't do everything. They do still need to be official statistics, so for which they're directly responsible, particularly when they're needed for comparative purposes, such as obviously with the SDGs. But users also look to the centre to play a role in helping support access and quality in the wider data and information world. A good example of that, I think, in the UK, in this broader role, is what's being done to support the voluntary application of the Code of Practice. I did check with the people involved in that just before doing this presentation. And I mean, there are currently 81 organisations involved in that community with voluntary application, 44 who have actually adopted the code, and 37 who are interested in adopting the code. That's quite a wide range of organisations. It'll be very interesting to hear from the users of the information these organisations produce, what is the impact of that initiative, and how do they see that it's actually improved the availability and quality of the information they get? So I think that's another piece of work following on from that. And that, I think, is just one example of how the centre can play a different role from just producing official statistics. So thinking about the way forward, Paul was asking about how do we move ahead. I do think that the UK statistics user engagement strategy could be a useful mechanism if the general principle of introducing the concept of public statistics is agreed, and so that actually the scope of the strategy covers this broad definition of public statistics, not just official statistics. That's not, I think, the way it's seen at the moment, but it could certainly be an extension and use, therefore, the mechanisms that have been set up within that strategy. One element within the strategy is this idea of themes. I think the right way forward, the way to access the information, the right way forward to engage with people, the right solutions may well vary between different types and different groups of statistics, different areas of statistics. So having further discussions within themes, who are people in producers and users working in those areas, I think is a really, really helpful one. So I would hope that any further discussion on public statistics actually happens within those theme areas and sub-themes, which is already the structure already set up with the strategy. So we've got something that we can build on there. One kind of caveat is an important point, which is that there's a lot of work and a lot of challenges in taking this forward. And the people involved in those discussions and implementing any new arrangements, whether it's the users or the people providing it, need to see there's a value to them in their participation. So I think that looking for the benefits and values for all involved needs to be an integral part of moving forward in any of the things that we're discussing. But then finishing on a positive note, there are already a lot of work going on. You've heard some of it here, and I'm sure there'll be some in the discussions in many different areas and many different forums about improving engagement and improving the availability of statistics. So if the general concept is approved in principle, then I think there's a lot that we can draw on and build on. So that's just sharing a few thoughts from the user perspective.
Anna, that was amazing. So rich. I saw Paul taking lots of notes. I'm sure that loads of those issues will come up in discussion. Really important topics. And I like the fact that you introduced external users, because I think Adrian was very much focusing on ONS as the user of these external sources. So great. Lovely, lovely contribution. And now I'm looking forward to hearing from Steve McFeely. So we now have two international statisticians, and Steve is the Director of Analysis of Data and Analytics at the World Health Organization. So you can imagine he's not been very busy over the last few years. So over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Denise, and thanks everybody. Thanks for the invitation to speak. And first of all, just congratulations to the RSS. I think this is a really relevant and timely discussion. So, unlike Deanna, who clearly prepared stuff in advance, I've listened to the speakers, so I'm going to throw out a set of thoughts and reactions. So it may be a bit less coherent, but I hope that there'll be something interesting. So the first thing that struck me listening to the presentation, I think, well, like any statistician, I think it's important to be clear on what we mean when we say public statistics. So I think putting work into a kind of a coherent definition would be really important. At the UN, we've had a lot of discussions recently around the idea of data as a public good. And clearly there's kind of tension. So when you see the economic definitions around non-rival and non-excludable, those are fine, but I think they're quite limiting. So I much prefer the broader kind of concept or broader understanding that a public good or a public statistics or a collective statistic would be a statistic that's produced for the benefit or the well-being of the public. Because I think that's a much richer concept than the kind of economic one. And of course, you can start arguing then about what well-being means and what benefit means, but just putting that aside for the moment. I think that there's also merit in the argument that statistics are a merit good, which is in a way another kind of economic concept that says not only should they be public, but they should be publicly funded to secure their impartiality and their independence. As I was listening, I mean, it's interesting. I think that we all more or less, from what I heard, all the speakers buy into the idea of some sort of notion of public good. But as I look back in history, I think it's a relatively recent concept. So when I look at it, it seems to me that the UN fundamental principles were probably the first time that really the idea that statistics should be a public good was formalized. And prior to that, I can't see any indication really that this was really an accepted concept. And in fact, just in your own country in the 1980s, if you look back, you see this Rayner doctrine that really kind of said the opposite. And I think you see similar in the US under the Bush administration. So this idea the statistics should even be an open or a public good is a relatively recent thing. And I think it's one that I would certainly applaud on it. From what I see, I think everybody else here seems to be saying the same. Now, if statistics are to be a public good, then I think it's worth thinking then about the implications of what that means. And why do I say that? Well, recently, so last year, the WHO had a number of health data seminars. And one of the things that came out of those seminars is that health statistics should be a global public good. Everybody was agreed this was great. And then shortly afterwards, I was talking to colleagues and they were saying that they were going to publish statistics soon and they were going to publish them through the Lancet. And I said, well, that's got to stop. I mean, you can't do that. And they said, why? Well, it's like we've just agreed that our statistics should be global public goods, and now you're privileging some statistics through a journal to which only some people have access. And it was kind of really, it was a really interesting discussion because you realize people had agreed to the principle, but then didn't understand the implications for them. And I think this is one of the things, not only to discuss the principle, but then kind of work downstream and actually work through what are the implications of that for a statistical system, for a statistical office? What does that mean for everyday actions? Another thing that didn't come out of the discussion, but it's one that we're having at the UN, and I suspect Angela may say more about this, but also the distinction between national and international. So what I get the sense when we're talking about official statistics, you're really talking about national official statistics. So then when we talk about a public good, are we talking about a national public statistic? But then what about the international system? And I think this is a really important but neglected question. I guess maybe in the European Union, of which you were formerly, a lot of people didn't have to worry about this so much because really the international body to which you mainly reported was Eurostat, which is a statistical office. But if you take the rest of the world, or you take the UN system, you have statistical departments embedded really in policy departments. So the culture of a statistics office doesn't exist in those departments. So UN bodies are very, very different to Eurostat, and I think it's a mistake to kind of to compare the two as if they're similar, because they're not. And what I see is that there's a lot of emphasis on quality and impartiality for national statistics, but then those data are submitted to the United Nations, and then they're at risk. I mean, being blunt, I think if you look at the dimensions of quality, I think the institutional element of statistical quality is the Achilles heel of the international system. So again, I would just kind of I would argue that it's important to consider both international official statistics and national official statistics. And then do you want to replace both? So should there be a national public statistics and international public statistics? I think there probably should, but again, it's important to think through the implications. One of the reasons why I think this debate is so timely is because, as the last speaker mentioned, is the Sustainable Development Goals. I think these have really had a profound impact on national statistical systems. So if we look at when the SDGs were negotiated and then the indicator part was handed over to the Statistical Commission, the Commission's natural conduit in the country is the National Statistical Office. So national statistical offices were then asked to become the focal point for all of the 231 indicators. Many of those indicators are outside the traditional scope of what a statistical office can do or has done. And you can see many statistical offices were struggling to cope with this new responsibility. So I think it forced a lot of statistical offices to really start thinking about the national statistical system, but also how to harness the expertise of other other statistical producers and users, because not only do they have to produce the indicators and submit them to the UN, but they also have to quality assure those indicators. And in a lot of cases, statistical offices have no experience in those indicators. If you think of, for example, investment promotion, I don't know of any statistical office that ever would have dealt with that, with resource mobilization, with many of the goals in Goal 16, for example, to do with institutional kind of governance. They're just well outside the expertise of a statistics office. So I think that's really brought into kind of sharp focus, both, again, this distinction between national and international, but also the role of the statistical office, the national statistical system, and what they're producing. So I think it's back to some of the questions that Paul raised about what should be produced, who decides. And I think so. In a way, the SDGs and maybe further governance programs will have a big impact on this debate. Also, Paul mentioned kind of the distinction as well between kind of moving beyond statistics to statistical analysis. So I think maybe also we need to think about distinctions between data, between statistics and statistical products. I think they're all different parts of the value chain. So when we say a public statistic, are we including all of those things, or just part of the value chain? Another challenge, I mean, again, it came up with both speakers, is we see that national or official statistics is becoming increasingly reliant on secondary sources, both administrative, but also kind of other secondary sources now. And that makes them increasingly vulnerable to disruption. So either the supply chain gets cut off, or the bigger risk actually is that the feed data is changed in a way maybe that the statisticians in the statistical office haven't fully appreciated. And this poses real challenges. So when we're talking about a public statistic, I think it's unrealistic to impose some sort of a public statistics label on secondary sources, because that may impose limitations or restrictions on the source data or on the data owner. And if it's administrative data, maybe there's some argument that as part of the kind of public system, their data should be public statistics. But if, as in a lot of cases, we're now using a lot of private data sources, then I think it's completely unrealistic to kind of impose restrictions on them. And I don't think it would work. So I'm not sure what the answer is there, but I think there's something to be teased out there. And that brings me to, so at the UN, one of the questions that's been raised is, should we be looking at statistics or data as a public good in themselves? Or should we be looking at issues that are public issues? So for example, climate change, and then saying that whatever data we determine that we need to manage a public issue properly, then those data should be protected. And maybe then they might be classified as public in some way. So I think you can look at it as the source or as the purpose. And I think there's interesting questions there. And then finally, to wrap up, just to come back to Adrienne's talk, I mean, I think what the ONS are doing is kind of really interesting. And I think that this is something that there's going to be more and more use of, is as we start to look at different data sources, as we start to grapple with how do we use or harness citizen science and other types of data, we need some sort of a mechanism that kind of reassures us that these are impartial, that they're independent, and so forth. So I think what the ONS is doing is really, really visionary, and I think it does point the way to the future. And I don't see why that couldn't be adapted to some kind of broader concept of a public statistic. So let me stop there. Thanks, Denise.
Thank you very much, Steve. You raised so many issues that I'm sure will come up later in discussion. I remember in one of the discussions I had with Paul raising, are we talking about public statistics or are we talking about publicly funded statistics? So we might come back to addressing that issue. many, many years ago, when I was in my late teens, I think I was involved in the establishment of radical statistics. And radical statistics was all about the fact that statistics should not just be for the government of the day, but should be for public good. We didn't use the terminology, and it's very interesting that you raise the Rayner Review, because I think it was as a result of the Rayner Review that we started to use the terminology of public good, but it had been around before then. Great, really good discussion. And our last discussant is Angela Mee. And Angela is the Chief Statistician of the UN Office for Drugs and Crime. She's also currently co-chair of the Committee of Chief Statisticians of the UN Family. And many of you won't know what that is, but that is exactly the body that tries to compensate for some of the issues that Steve was just raising, that statistics is very often embedded in policy UN departments that are about advocacy rather than about truth. So the UN, the Coordination Committee, as it used to be known, I think it's changed its name since I was involved, but the Coordination Committee is really about trying to protect the quality and share expertise amongst the different UN agencies to ensure that international statistics aspire to be high quality in the same way that national statistics do. So Angela, you're the perfect person to continue this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. I co-chair the group of chief statisticians with Steve. And so many of the things that he also said is really part of the discussion that we have among ourselves. So, well, answering the question, Paul's question, is it the time? And, you know, should we look at public statistics? So I would say maybe two reasons for a big yes. And inspiring, it is inspiring that this conversation is starting. One is, if you want, a branding issue. If I understood what you want to say basically moving the notion of official statistics into public statistics. So official statistics, the branding issue and challenge with official statistics is that, first of all, outside of official statistician, I mean, whatever official, you know, I would say national statistical offices, people have a different understanding of what official statistics is. So, you know, it's a code that we use among ourselves in this kind of discussion, but it's not the same understanding out there. And second, you know, at the time when there is, I have to say, a lot of also distrust in government institution and something. Sometimes, you know, we picture and we use the term official statistics, meaning the best statistics, the one that meets the fundamental principle, the ethics. For some, is exactly the opposite. For some, is the idea that is linked to a specific government. And so, I wanted to give you an example. We support countries and undertaking, for example, surveys on corruption. And you know how many times we had to defend to the civil society, to others, that we want to work with National Statistical Office. But their argument is, how can you work with the government institution to monitor what the government is doing? So in that sense, the wording may not be for everyone understand the way we understand it. Then for more conceptually, why, you know, I think the idea of moving from official in a way to public, I don't want to repeat what Steve said on the public good. Maybe, you know, he added the word public good. I may add another word, public common good, in the sense that for two, you know, to mean two different things. One, to me, what you're proposing, Paul, and I don't know if I'm over reading what you're saying, is a Copernican revolution. And I will explain in what term of this revolution, but I'm not sure you want to go so far. But the idea of common good statistics, public common good statistics, is first of all the idea that is not a monopoly of few. Now, you know, the idea of official statistics is the monopoly of few that has decided what is good. And Paul, you mentioned it, you know, who decide what is for public good or not. But also there is the ivory tower that they can produce the best statistics, that they are the one independent, that they were. To me, the idea of the common is that Well, it's not only that, if you want, ivory tower level of institution that can produce what the public needs. And so in that sense, to me, the common is the idea that it's not an ownership of few, but it's really the ownership of the public, and it's the ownership and responsibility of the public also to defend it. It's not only the responsibility of the National Statistical Office to maintain good, and statistics. So that's why, for me, is a big yes. Where I think, Paul, I would challenge a bit more what you described. You mentioned still a focus on sources. To me, this notion of the public, then it goes away. And that's where I think with official statistics, we often focus on who produces it rather than what is produced. And whether, to me, that's where the Copernican revolution comes. So the center is not, again, who, but the center becomes the how. And in that sense, quality assurance and the respect of the principle becomes the frame where all the others going around, not the other way around. That, now often sometimes the National Statistical Office is seen as the coordinator, so the one that stands in the center and everybody goes around. I would say the other way around. We should all go around to the principles. And we should all be responsible. But the quality assurance, who define again the quality? And when Dana was speaking, I was, it dawned on me that I say, well, but we always have, when we talk about quality assurance framework, that all of these frameworks have been developed by statisticians. And I'm wondering if users would think about quality in a different way as we statisticians see it. So again, another, if you want, a bit of a revolution and say, should we now think about quality in refer to not only our statistical standards, but again, that's where a more common standard that is not the statistics as the center, and also because the standard. And then I just wanted to comment a bit with Adrian said, in terms of we tend, again, as we statistician, I'm a statistician, so that's why I'm allow myself to criticize in a way a statistician, that we tend, when we see new sources, then we tend to be stricter on something that somebody else is doing. And I'll give you an example, just a small example that I have in my office. We are doing for many years, we monitor drug cultivation, opium, coca, around the world with satellite images. And we had a system that, visually we interpret coca and opium. So I've been pushing my staff to say, can we look at artificial intelligence? And then they keep saying, well, it's not good enough, etc. But I say, what is the error that we have now with our method? They cannot answer that question, but they are very, very conscious that the new method has to meet very high standard. And so now it made me think, Adrian, what you said, and there is something that you said that struck me, and I would be happy, would like to maybe understand better, because I don't know much the UK system, so maybe I'm thinking about different countries. You said those that are not mandated to comply with the quality, the principles. And then I said, but do you have, so are there, I'm not aware, at least the countries we work a lot with Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Justice, etc. I'm not aware that in their mandate or something, there is that they have to comply to quality standards and statistics, unfortunately. Again, you talk to a National Statistical Office, they all know about the fundamental principle, about quality, everyone, but outside, in line ministry, I'm not sure there is. And so I was wondering, I say, again, why do we assume that just because he's a minister, and maybe you have it in the UK, I don't want to judge it, but I haven't seen in many other countries, assuming that just because he's a minister, then we take what it takes. So I would say, I think it's fantastic what you're saying in terms of reviewing the quality, but shouldn't be done for everything, not just those that are outside of the government, on everything that again would become public statistics, being a private an NGO. So that's where I think becomes again not focusing on who produce, but what how is produced. So to at the end, I just want also to bring you, as Steve mentioned, more look at also at international statistics. That's why we deal more with international statistics. So let us also maybe bring to your discussion thinking also bigger than just the country. And it's clear, as Steve was mentioning, that many of the things we deal today are transnational. You get the example of COVID, and the question is, isn't the responsibility of UK public common good statistics also to ensure that others have also the quality statistics? Because the statistics on COVID of other countries impact on the UK citizens too. And so isn't it also the responsibility of national institution to think about bigger, how do we construct to help again the citizen of our country to have information that affect them, but that they happen somewhere else. And more what is happening outside of our own country affects what our life in our country. And so in that vein, what we have been discussing with Steve and with our group is to say, in this vein, how do we protect the global statistics? Because it's in the interest of the UK that other countries in Europe, and maybe Europe is, at least when the UK was in the EU, but but in general, other countries, viruses don't know, don't see border, and they don't recognize countries with good statistical office or bad statistical office, or they don't recognize countries that are willing to share good data and countries that are not willing to share good data. So how do we make a system that goes beyond the, if you want to say that we all apply the fundamental principle? Today is not enough. And can we think in other fields? They adopted what we call international convention. Think about all the international convention to protect environment. International convention that, for example, we have here in Vienna on transnational crime. Convention that try to protect something that is all common to all of us in the world. So. But in those conventions, fundamentally, is not just to say, okay, we are all good with respect to the principles that we have. But there are systems of saying, well, I will exchange data with you if you respect the principle. And otherwise, in a way, you're not part of my club, of the club that want to protect together with the same principles. And so how can we construct, we call it a convention, a compact, however we want to call it, a regulatory, a governance system at international level where there are incentives for parties that, by the way, should go beyond governments, because today the parties for statistics and data goes much beyond. But what are the incentives that we can give to all of these parties to respect those principles, and also action that can be taken when these principles are not respected? So I leave you with that question back. Thank you.
Angela, fantastic. Thank you very much. Very challenging and really rich contribution to the discussion. And I think I'm sure we'll come back to the issue of incentives. I was interested in Deanna's discussion about the 81 organisations that have signed up to the value system in effect, and why, what are the incentives for them to do so? I'm going to be quite strict with the panel because I know they're all dying to come in and contribute to the discussion, but I want to hear from those of you who have been listening in first. And so I'm going to take some discussion from the floor, so to speak. And if you've got a question that's specific to an individual, it'd be useful for you to say. And then I'll come back to the panel a bit later after we've had some discussion. So please, if you'd like to turn your cameras on, do so. And if you'd like to use the hand function, then please do so. I have already got a couple of questions in the chat box, so I'm going to ask the people who've put those in if they would like to actually ask their questions. If not, I can read them out. So the first person to put one in was Ramsey Maraidi, are you with us? Are you able to unmute and contribute? No? No, in that case, I'll just read that question. So Ramsey says, thank you for this very important subject. How do you feel about social networks, dark data and web scraping as useful and reliable data for reporting SDGs? And do you think that the GAFA has a role to play? Okay, so we'll come back to that question. Megan Towers. Are you able to contribute, Megan? Hi, welcome. Nice to see you.
And you, yeah, it's just a clarification request, really. I started off coming to this meeting wondering what the difference between public and official statistics is, not only for the user end of things, but also as a producer as well, what that would mean for me as somebody who produces official statistics. And I think it was clear early on that, well, just a clarification really, would it be that official statistics are those requested by the minister and public statistics are those requested by the public? And it's just that I think the clarification is going to become increasingly important. We've now got national statistics, official statistics, and you're introducing public statistics. And I think somebody mentioned, I forget who now, about increasingly cluttered landscape. And I just think having these clear definitions is just going to help everyone's, ours and public's, understanding of what the differences are if we're going to clutter it up more. And also, this sort of like the second add-on question, if I may, is if there's going to be if public statistics are those who are statistics that public get to ask for, how is that going to be moderated or filtered in some way? Because I can imagine there are going to be some departments who are going to be massively overwhelmed with every Jane and Joe under the sun wanting some little request or something. So yeah, it was just a bit of clarification, I think, really.
Okay, Megan, thank you very much. I don't think I'm going to pass those across as questions at the moment because I think there's lots of issues that are questions, actually. We're trying to scope out what public statistics might be. So I'm sure people will come back to addressing those really important issues. Thank you. Now I can see two people want to speak. Merle Gearing, I pass to you?
Oh, thank you very much. I am a user of national statistics in this country and a great critic of the ONS. So this is my question. If you create a category called public statistics with some nice standards and nice codes of practice, people are going to sanctify it. It will become unchallengeable, like the currently existing national statistics. There's no effective challenge. So what are you going to do to build into any such definition that the numbers can be challenged in some independent way? And I will quote to you that where we are in the UK, this is about the UK situation, where we've had an Office of Statistics Regulation for quite a long time. But in 2016, Andrew Tyree said this: the ONS has fallen a long way short, lacking intellectual curiosity, prone to silly mistakes, and unresponsive to the needs of the consumers of its statistics. So what are you going to do to make sure that public statistics don't fall into the same hole?
Okay, very challenging. Thank you, Merle. Walter Rademacher, you want to contribute?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm speaking from Germany, and I was once the Director General of Eurostat, so what Steve McFeely has mentioned as the exception. So I would like to stimulate the discussion that I very much like and appreciate. Thank you very much for the colleagues in the RSS to put this on the table, is firstly to think about statistics as being married with the state, the nation state. So if you start thinking in this way, then a consequence of the relationship, a change in the relationship of the state, would draw consequences also for the, let's say, state statistics. And Steve McFeely has already mentioned one change, and this is that the nation state no longer is autonomously capable to find solutions for the current problem, so globalization. And the second is the relationship between the state and its citizens. And I think here, if this is changing, then also statistics has to follow. And this will have a consequence also for the so-called mandate and license, social mandate and social license that statistics will have to get once we change to public or public common good statistics. The second stimulation I would like to bring in by thinking as statistics as an industrial product. And in industrial products, you would also have a similar problem that you have to label by way of quality codification and quality certification, so that users see whether the quality follows a specific standard. So a standard, so if you now buy a kind of biological food, then you would expect as a user that this is certified following a specific standard. And I think this is this is not a new discussion, but so far, official statisticians have been very, very afraid to embark on this discussion, because they have believed that it is enough to say it's the authority of being official. So far, it was not needed to distinguish different quality profiles. But once we go in this direction, we have, let's say, not only one, let's say, official or not official. We have different shades, different grades of quality profiles, and we need to be very explicit about the brand that we want to sell. So this is what I want to bring in. Thank you.
Walter, can I ask you a question? When we were discussing the issue of sort of quality kite marks some years ago within the RSS, actually within the official statistics group, one of the problems in doing that is this issue of fitness for purpose. You know, that a statistic can be absolutely good quality for one purpose and not for another. So how would you overcome that?
Yes, I think this is exactly the experience I have made in Eurostat, that we have purposes which call for very, very, very high authority. So indicators which you remember, the 3% deficit and 60% debt figure. There, the purpose is even written in the European, let's say, Lisbon Treaty. And this calls for the highest possible authority, almost like bookkeeping. On the other hand, you have statistical indicators which are far away from being, let's say, called to be so strict and so audited, almost audited. So there is a wide range of different purposes, and correspondingly, you have also a wide range of product qualities, but this for an industrial product is quite normal. It's not the exception. It's a rule for an industrial product that as a provider you have a high brand, but under this brand you have a variety of different products with different profiles. But this makes us really it urges us to better understand the user needs. And to distinguish, let's say Mercedes A-class, B-class, or a electronic scooter produced by the same brand.
Okay, so, thank you very much. Thanks, Walter. I've got two more people that I can recognise as wanting to speak. Allison Mcfarland first. Allison, are you there? Are you able to unmic and join us?
I'm very glad to see the discussion taking place. I'm chair of what's called the official statistics section. One of the groups within the RSS has come together to put on this meeting. I would point out we had a predecessor back in the Rayner days, the Government Statistical Service study group, and it had a meeting which had a particularly provocative title, and a number of us went along and asked a lot of awkward questions. That was the last meeting that group had. And as it happened, a number of us were members of Radical Statistics, which Denise has mentioned just now, and we were actually accused of getting together to disrupt the meeting, which we hadn't. It was sort of instinctive. Moving on from that, points. One of the things I think I would raise, one of the critiques which Radical Statistics developed was and used in looking at statistics, the concept that statistics are a social product, so that they are a product of who decided how are decisions made about how you collected statistics on a particular topic, how is it decided how you should go about collecting the statistics, what you should include, what you should exclude, what analyses you should do, and clear in those days, particularly what you should publish and what you should not publish. And there are more mechanisms. I think when we're thinking about what gets published and what gets on the agenda, think of the role of parliamentary questions, and certainly in the UK, parliamentary questions and freedom of information requests. So there are these mechanisms for the public to put in questions which may or may not be answered. You know, disproportionate cost is a very convenient way of refusing to answer questions that are not wanted to be in the public domain. So I think we need to look at it much more broadly as a set of processes rather than trying to get tight categories of what are public statistics and what are official statistics. There is a much more of a spectrum. Another point which arises out of some discussion is whether we're thinking about statistics designed for use for international comparisons, in which case you have to take account of if you're wanting to compare between countries, you need some sort of guarantee that people are collecting it data in the same way. And a very good example is statistics about births and deaths. There are different criteria for what events are included in the statistics, what is a birth and what is a miscarriage, for example. So those sort of things make a difference in comparability between countries. And in fact, we had a very, and also if you're trying to collect data within, say, a high income country to measure as much as possible, and Adrian quoted an example of that, which is the maternal death rates coming out of confidential inquiries. And in the nations of the UK, we try to collect, have a very wide definition, including domestic violence in pregnancy, and this involves a lot of data linkage. But this is not comparable with a maternal death rate collected in another country. And Gwyneth Lewis, who pioneered this method, was very adamant that the report should publish the most complete data possible to look at the situation within the UK, but the basic minimal rate for international comparisons, and so that we were comparing at least what you could collect in other high-income countries. So, and maternal deaths is an example where in many of the countries with the highest maternal death rates, these are produced on estimates because women will die in childbirth miles away from anybody who's counting anything. So I think it's important to think about what you can measure within your own country, what you can compare within categories of countries, and certainly I'm sure Steve will tell us that there are many publications of WHO about measuring and estimating maternal mortality and types of estimates. So it's important to admit and recognise you're not measuring the same thing. So those are the points really I wanted to make about.
Thank you very much, Alison. I think raising the national international dimension of this again is an issue. In the international development section of the RSS, we've been discussing a paper which will address this exact issue. So I think we'll involve you in those discussions. I've also got Penny Babb would like to contribute.
Yes, thank you so much. And to say that I work in the Office for Statistics Regulation, so I'm involved in the voluntary application of our Code of Practice. My role is also as the lead on the Code of Practice and maintaining our Code of Practice for statistics. So it's a few of our areas of work have been talked about in the course of the discussions this morning. And to begin with, I just wanted to say we very much welcome this conversation. We absolutely are in this space of wanting to raise the importance of thinking about the various sources of information that are being used and are important in supporting decisions, across society. And as has been said a number of times, not just within sort of the areas of the UK, but internationally, and that the UK is a complex environment. We have, 4 administrations, and of course we have connections internationally. And in a way, I think our experiences, I hope, are going to be useful for helping others to also, move through this challenge of thinking around the concept of public statistics. I did wonder whether or not, rather than asking a question of the panel, I did wonder whether it was helpful if I said a little bit about national statistics. Has been mentioned a few times, and one of the things that we have been looking at recently in the last couple of years or so is the label of national statistics, as has been used, and it has been mentioned here how confusing it could be to have multiple terms. Well, this is actually a critical thing that we have been talking about within the UK, the confusion around labelling. And our review is coming to an end, and we have concluded and recommended that we actually move away from the term of national statistics, that the point of it is really reflecting, and it's kind of picking up on the point that's been made from Angela around, and Stephen, and thinking around how do you really check to see whether or not official statistics are meeting the standards. And this is our process, has been through this independent review that we, as the regulator for official statistics within the UK, we carry out a process of independent review. And the product of that has been us awarding the national statistics designation, as we call it. And we're looking to simplify how to explain this, what it looks like, because the critical thing is official statistics across the board are incredibly important, and we want to make sure that they're well understood and that the public are appropriately assured about the kind of processes that are being managed by producers, and also how we are checking to see that that is actually happening. So a lot of these labels get in the way, and so we are trying to clarify that. So that is something that we are continuing to work through, and we'll be doing more on over the coming year. But I do think that public statistics does offer something that is really opening out, for me, in a way, in the work that we were done on national statistics and looking at our review, in talking to some users and various stakeholders, one of the things that became very clear to me was that we call on producers to have a commitment to apply the principles of trustworthiness, quality, and value. These are important standards in the way that they are working. But users did say to us, how can they be sure that those commitments are being followed through? And I do think that the SDG example is a really interesting one for showing how we can have the professional standards that are expressed through our code, through our pillars, trustworthiness, quality, and value, but there are ways that you can actually then follow through and have further reassurance that actually statistics from a wide range of different backgrounds, you know, beyond government, all kinds of different organizations, can be looked at within this kind of context, this kind of framework, and look to see that you can actually have confidence as users. Do they meet your needs? You can understand why they're being produced, and in understanding something of that context, do they give you a useful set of information for you to go, and you need to be able to be appropriately informed about that. We're looking for that across all official statistics, and I think it's going to be really important. In a way, provenance of public statistics is going to be an incredibly important question, and having confidence in them, how to actually have that. And what I would say is that trustworthiness, quality, and value, we find actually simplifying our code into these 3 pillars is a really, really powerful concept. And Denise, I'll end with this one point, answering your question about what is the incentive for organizations to actually voluntarily apply the code pillars. It's because we explain it as it's a thinking tool. Applying the code is thinking and challenging yourself as an analyst, thinking about trustworthiness, quality, and value, and whatever question you're looking to deal with, actually having that set of lenses to actually think about and challenge the question that you're doing is a really powerful one. You don't actually have to go away and look in some rule book about what is it I'm meant to be doing. It's a way of thinking and approaching the work that you do, and that is what is working. Is that it is helpful in helping how you work and how you do what you do, and then looking to see how can you communicate that to your users, your audiences, your stakeholders about your approach. It challenges your approach, you challenge each other, and it actually helps you also work better, and collaborate has been talked about a number of times as well, within organizations, between organizations, with users. That's the thing that we hear is that it provides that challenge. I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Right.
Though.
Thank you very much. And I think you heard Merle Goering earlier actually ask questions about whether these labels sometimes are used as a defense as well. So, you know, there's the incentive, but there's also, are they always positive labels? So we need to consider that too. Right. I have run out. That was very helpful, Penny. Thank you for that contribution. I've run out of people who want to contribute, so I'm going to pass across to the panel. Paul, would you like to go last? Yeah. So, Deanna, you're up on my screen at the top, and now I'll go Deanna, Adrian, Stephen, Angela. Okay. Deanna.
Okay. Thanks very much, and thanks for all those comments. I mean, I just really kind of reinforcing what some of the people were saying. I know what seems to be coming out is, you know, needing clear definitions. And I think we really, in everything we do, we need to absolutely clarify. And some of the terms have really not helped. There was a question around how some of this, the requirements can be moderated. And I would once again sort of stress the importance of this working together within themes, within areas, because basically it's not that you're just going to have one member of the public asking, you know, the official stats to say, I want this specific thing just for me. What we would be needing to do is to look at the user community and see what their requirement is, and then have an exchange of ideas on an ongoing basis. This is what user engagement is about, engaging between the users and the producers and everyone else in terms of what is it that's needed, what's useful, how we can produce it in a reliable way, and then out of that we come up with something which is statistics which people, you know, find valuable. So I think it's putting in place that engagement between the public, professional users, and the public. So I think that's where you start to bring that in. And I think you also, there's a responsibility of the users and the public there. It's not just done to them they need to be active and expressing their views. So I think that's really important to have that ongoing exchange. And I think the challenge comes in there as well, because if it's the public statistics and they've been involved, they can see it's for them, then if it's open and understandable, then they're able to challenge it. It doesn't sort of stay within an ivory tower. So I think that's really important. It answers quite a few of the questions to continue with this, setting up mechanisms for exchange of ideas and working forward in that way.
Great. Thank you, Deanna. Actually, I'm going to change my mind. Steve, you probably ought to go next because you've got a clash of meetings, haven't you? You might need to leave us. So, Steve, can I pass to you next?
Thanks, Denise. Where to start? I think maybe with Walter. I think what Walter said I found interesting. And I guess he articulated more clearly what I was saying. I think when you relabel something or when you label something, you really have to think about the implications of what that means. And I think this is really what he was stressing, that official statistics are born out of the state. So if you change that, what does that mean? And that could be good or bad. I mean, and equally on the certification, I mean, I think this is a really important issue. And I know Myrtle kind of raised it as kind of something to hide behind, but yeah, I mean, I think we need to label things to enable rather than to kind of hide behind. But then, Denise, it was actually your reaction was a very interesting one, because this is something I worry about in the context of SDGs, where we see a lot of indicators being repurposed. And I'm not sure always the repurpose is appropriate. And even if it is, I mean, I think it's very important to understand the origins of an indicator, why it was constructed. So then sometimes when it's repurposed, it can just subtly drift away from what it was there for. So, and I think, I mean, maybe it's slightly off the point, but it just kind of hit me when you said it. I think that's really important. Allison, I'm not going to react. I mean, okay, there's a lot I could say about mortality statistics, which I'll spare you all. But yeah, I mean, so then back to, I mean, I think Megan's questions were really good. I mean, the challenge around definition and then how to manage, if you go to some broader definition, how do you manage the kind of expectation, and who decides what to publish, what's important? And maybe if you have public statistics, maybe you don't need official statistics anymore. So maybe you can simplify the narrative. I don't know. Ramsey had just mentioned about sources. I mean, I think it's back to the point that Angela made. I think in this day and age, we have to consider all sources. So I don't think we should rule anything in or out. I think in the modern world, the stuff we're being asked to measure is now so complex that we have to really, we don't have the luxury of ruling out sources just because we don't like them. They all have their own challenges, their own biases, but they have their own opportunities and strengths too. So then one thing that didn't come out, I mean, one thing that might figure into the discussion as well, we've really so far in the discussion been looking at this from a kind of a co-production model, but we could look at a more co-creation model as well, which is, you know, we start the journey together instead of just somebody producing something and then we assess the quality. And I think we're starting to see that type of approach in some countries around citizen science. And I think that this is a really interesting thing. So I think public statistics, it would be wise to look at that as well. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there. And if you don't mind, I will disappear. So
great.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
For your contribution, Steve. And I think we saw increasing co-creation during COVID, certainly in this country. So it was a positive. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Adrian, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I will start with the comment by Merle, the criticism. So thank you, first of all, Penny, for highlighting, commenting on that already. Sort of Penny highlighted that we are responding to user needs like on an ONS level, but I won't be so answering this in an ONS wide perspective, but specifically in an SDG context to your question. So your criticism of us failing to respond to user needs. I think there's been a change in the ONS recently that we're really trying to like understand user needs and see why they need the data and really try to accommodate to that. So in the SDG context, within the example that I was giving, that when the data source fails the initial stage or fails the protocol, we come back to the data provider, we highlight where and we collaborate, as Denise mentioned earlier, like the sort of the idea of co-creation, collaboration is really big, especially in the SDG context, because the panelists have mentioned earlier as well, a lot of these data sources or data gaps we're filling, they require collaboration, especially like on an international level. So what we're trying to do now is we're really trying to work with the data providers to like highlight how they've sort of come short of the protocol and how they can change their approach and change their like certain methods to fill those criteria and meet them. So I think this is sort of where we're changing direction, and we're really trying to understand data users and data providers' needs and trying to like create a synergy to then fill these data gaps. And then moving on to like another comment that I've heard across the panel like a few times was sort of how are we trying to expand this sort of the connection between national and international statistics. So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to create a blueprint within this model, as a lot of you have mentioned. You can scale this model and you can apply this into different contexts. Obviously, our approach was based on the UK's code of practice, but you can apply this to many very different like national levels, but also international levels. So this idea was taken from Statistics Netherlands. You can essentially apply this tool to very different national contexts, but also to an international context. So 2 weeks ago, we gave the same presentation at the UNECE, so the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, and their discussions ongoing how we can create a similar concept where we can scale this and apply this on an international scale, where we can collaborate between different member states and trying to find an appropriate approach where we can sort of rate these or judge these non-official sources, not only on a national context, but sort of internationally. And I think Angela mentioned this as well, that when it comes to then speaking to different government departments, that oftentimes we would also like those to apply those same principles. And the idea is that when we sort of create this discussion on a much more like wider level, that then this will become much more pertinent in people's minds, and it will then continue towards the discussion. And then the last point that I had that I wanted to quickly touch upon was, I think, Ramsey's comment in terms of like whether we would think about data scraping or using social media or like social networks. And similar to the previous point, yes, I think that's a great and really rich data source. The only concerns at the moment is with transparency and privacy when it comes to these data providers. For example, Facebook. I would just say, like, I mean, we're happy to put them through a protocol and see whether or not they would work, and we're happy to collaborate. But the main thing to keep in mind with social media or social networking sites is that sort of the data privacy and transparency aspects might not meet our code of practice, and therefore might not have been considered yet. However, if some of those practices change on their behalf, on their side, we're very happy to sort of start conversations and incorporate those data collection. Data collection. So I think that's it from me. Thank you again. Thank you for all of the speakers. It's been.
I think you're breaking up a little, Adrian. Thank you for your contribution and being so open to the users. That's a really nice spirit. Angela, you've got some challenges there about taking some of these ideas forward at the international level. So do you want to react to anything you've heard today?
Yeah, one thing is I always think discussing with native speakers always give me a lot to learn. So I learned a lot of labeling of statistics, frontier statistics, radical statistics, and frankly, I didn't realize that national statistics had a specific meaning for the UK. So thank you very much for the lesson to a non-native speaker on all of this terminology.
It's not just native speakers. I've just looked at Walter's comments about the difference between brand and label, which is very interesting. So
yeah. And no, I just want to quickly, and then to finish with something still that, that's is the starting of a discussion. I don't think we have all the answer to all of the things we discuss, but I think that's the importance of just starting and raising and understanding what we need and how possibly, what is realistic or not. So I'm still stuck with this idea that Denise, you ask, and on the incentive to apply the code, and Penny mentioned something that again say, well, because as an analyst, as a statistician, that's what we want. My worry is that how do we deal when there are no statisticians taking the decisions, and on what to publish and not to publish. And so how can we protect that ethical standard? And I think more and more we see this coming. So that's the question. And I don't know, that's where I say maybe in the interconnection. And for me, the interconnection, because I'm at international level, but maybe at national level, the interconnection has also some meaning, is when it's like that's why I said participate in a club. You pay a fee to participate in a club, so you give up in a way a little bit of ownership on your data, but you know that you are getting back a lot more. And so maybe creating this interactivity, and Walter mentioned this quality label, like the fair trade. So the stamp of what equality statistics is. The question is who certified? Again, you always have someone that has to be certified, and so that's what I keep, and that's what I think we bring back also in our discussion at international level on this idea of an international data governance system. To support. And just to conclude, I wanted to answer, there was this question on web scraping and darknet, and just by saying that, yeah, that's an example of how sometimes statistics, indeed, they don't need to have a traditional system that we want. And I just want to give you an example. We collect a lot of data on seizure. And very often, particularly in countries that do not have a system that they report, even for themselves, seizure, they often report it to the media. So we do a web scraping, and then we look at what has been reported by government officials to the media, and we have much better statistics than what a country can collect. I'm not talking about the UK, of course. I'm talking about the countries where there's not that capacity. And the darknet is a fantastic, for researcher, is a fantastic place to go. Indeed, we can monitor the drug market in a way that can never monitor outside the darknet. So definitely these are incredible and very interesting tools. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to participate in the discussion.
Thank you, Angela. You always come up with such wonderfully concrete examples. Fantastic. I'm really interested in the issue of incentives because, of course, I used to head the UK Data Archive, and I used to have to persuade data producers to deposit their data in the data archive for use by researchers. And we worked on carrots, the incentives for doing so, in terms of publication and so on, but also on sticks. So we actually introduced a system whereby if you got public funding, it was required that you did so that you deposited your data. So I think there are some parallels here. It's been a fantastic meeting. I want to thank everybody for participating, the audience and our 5 incredible speakers. I'd like to thank the RSS and the different groups within the RSS for organising this meeting. And I'm going to sign off and pass across to Paul, who's going to close the meeting. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Denise, and thanks to everybody. It's been a fascinating, helpful, and encouraging discussion. Also slightly daunting because I'm with Steve and Angela and others. This is the start of a discussion, I think, but it's one that I can feel very much we need to build on and continue. We've been very rich. We're still debate a very rich time. We're still trying to kind of scope things through. We're not got answers yet. It's a nice convention in an RSS formal discussion meeting that the speaker is invited to make a few remarks and then respond more fully in writing. Well, we're in that position. Let me just say a few words in a second. But there's much for NSAG to consider and distill into how we take this forward. But just a selection of the many things that come out. I mean, I think to kind of keep coming back to the point of starting with the purpose and needs is kind of a way into this, a way to start the journey, as some people have said. But that also kind of, I think, invokes a role for users and potential users, as well as for the providers. This is not just about the providers doing things. I very much liked Angela's question about, do users think differently about quality? Well, I think actually, in my experience, quite a few of them do. They think about it as fitness for purpose. And that was a phrase that was kind of used quite widely, I think, beyond or out with official statistics. But in official statistics, we've got a kind of slightly more formulaic position, which is kind of a set of almost equal components. And maybe it's something this is about, kind of looking at the weightings you give to different components. I mean, Adrian and his colleagues don't let one component get a weight of 0, but actually in some circumstances that may be what's necessary to fit the purpose. I don't know, but it's just an example of the kind of things that we need to raise. So really, kind of the idea of a kind of co-creation model seems kind of really really interesting if we can kind of get producers and users signed up to this. It's been great to have so many people around this table. Everybody's got lots of views and challenges, but we also need to kind of go beyond that and kind of raise the profile, I think, and try and explore this. Lots of other. It'd be unfair to kind of pull out other odd points because they're all kind of worth thinking about and taking forward. So I think the simplest thing to do is really to kind of draw it to a close there, to thank everybody for contributing. Thank you very much, Denise, for chairing it. Thanks to Angela, Adrian and Steve for their really helpful contributions, and Dina. Thanks to the OSS and IDS committee members for supporting and organising the joint meeting of 2 sections, providing such a great opportunity to explore public statistics. Thanks for all the behind-the-scenes support from Mary Jo and her colleagues at the RSS, including coping with me dropping out and dropping back in again. Sorry about that. The recording will be available on the RSS YouTube channel before long, and we'll keep you posted on how the RSS is taking all this forward. In broad terms, at the moment we're in kind of exploratory mode. In early 2022, we asked all sections and group committees to consider the relevance of public statistics, and we got some kind of interesting feedback from there. There are this meeting, and there may be 1 or 2 others, possibly looking at perhaps more particular issues like environmental statistics or levelling up as topics within the UK, or maybe not. But in July, we're hoping to have a plenary session to take stock of the discussions, to assess if the concept of public statistics should be pursued, and if so, in the autumn, the NSAG will be working up a proposal for an RSS campaign, possibly with certainly I think with partner organisations. We'll consider that first within the RSS, and then we'll come out and talk with people about how we can take this forward. So thank you very much. With that, perhaps I'll close the meeting, say goodbye everybody, and have a good weekend. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.